Hey ghouls and gals, welcome back to my channel. My name is Taylor and today is yet another video in my book series going through all of the books recommended in 101 horror books to read before you're murdered by Sadie Hartmann, aka Mother Horror. We've done haunted house horror, we've done demonic possession horror, and now we are moving on to witches. That's right, we are talking about the occult and witchcraft today, and Mother Horror says that horror is often expressed trauma, so horror fiction concerning the occult or witchcraft are typically tales of religious-fueled persecution or oppression on those thought to be practicing paganism. Now, the witchcraft section in this book has 3 book recommendations, so we are going to be reading 3 books for this vlog today. The first book that was recommended was The Year of the Witching by Alexis Henderson. This came out in 2020. It's about a young woman who faces persecution in her puritanical and patriarchal society because she was born of a woman who married and made a family with a man of a different race. I read The Year of the Witching the year it came out. I really loved it. Alexis Henderson is one of my auto-read authors. She comes out with something, I read it. I really enjoyed this one. This one is very atmospheric, so if you are looking for a autumnal witchy book, I think this would be great. I loved the way in which we kind of got like an alternate universe Salem and exploring witchcraft and the persecution of witches, or just really anybody that a community would find different. The Year of the Witching is the only YA horror that was in this list of book recommendations about witches, so because I've already read that one, I'm adding another book to the TBR that's kind of similar. I'm going to be reading The Invocations by Krystal Sutherland. This one is YA, like The Year of the Witching was. It is also horror having to deal with witches. I feel like when I'm searching for witch books, they more often slot into fantasy categories than horror categories. I'm always looking for more witchy horror, so I think this book, even though it wasn't mentioned in 101 horror books to read before you're murdered, just to keep this vlog at 3 books. Like The Year of the Witching, this is a YA horror book about witchcraft, about young women who are confronted with the patriarchy or patriarchal structures and potentially use witchcraft as a means of beating the system and overcoming oppression. The next witch book recommended is Hex by Olde Heuvelt. This came out in 2013. Now, this is a book that I've heard a lot about, I just haven't got to yet. This book, I believe, was re-released pretty recently by Tor Nightfire, but this is the original copy that my library had. This is about a small town that is plagued by a 17th century witch. She haunts the whole town. The town has to figure out a way to get rid of her. I enjoy stories about small towns, but in particular where the town is kind of one character as itself, so I'm intrigued about this one. And then the third and final book that was recommended in this section is The Nightmare Girl by Janz. This came out in 2015. Now, if you've watched the other videos in this vlog series, then you know that I'm relying on my library. I'm kind of on a no-buy this year, and when I tell you I could not find The Nightmare Girl anywhere, I cannot find it at my physical library, I cannot find it on Libby or Hoopla. I have access to 4 different library cards. I just couldn't find this one anywhere. So at the very end of this vlog series, I am planning some vlogs where I go back and try and hunt down some of these more elusive titles. And The Nightmare Girl is definitely going to be one of those titles because I've heard a lot about Janz as an author, and I'm bummed that I'm not going to get to this one today. However, there is another witch recommendation in this book that I am going to be reading for this vlog. Now, throughout this book, not only are there sections on different subgenres of horror, but there are also a number of author spotlights, one of those being for Buehlman. This is an author that I've read from before, but he has a lot of works that I have not read yet or heard about, and I'm really excited to read more from him. One of the books that was in the recommended titles for the author spotlight was The Necromancer's House, and it is paranormal, it has witches, warlocks, it's dark fantasy. So The Necromancer's House by Buehlman is going to be the 3rd book in this vlog. It's technically a recommendation because it shows up on that author spotlight page. It's from 2013 and it is about witches. So there we have it. Those are our 3 witchy books that we are going to be reading for this vlog. And we are going to start this vlog off with The Invocations by Krystal Sutherland. The Invocations is a darkly seductive witchy thriller where, though both men and demons lurk in the shadows, girls refuse to go quietly into the night. 3 young magical women must team together to stop a killer of young women before they each end up next on his list. It's a captivating read for fans of dark atmospheric fantasy and horror who crave stories that explore themes of female empowerment, queer identity, and the complexities of witchcraft. So I am now 50% of the way through the Invocations, and I am enjoying my time with this one so far. I definitely think that this was a really great pick to put in place of Year of the Witching. I just find that YA horror, YA in general, honestly, it's not like my go-to genre. Most of the books that I read in any given year are adult fiction, but there is something so fun about YA horror, and in particular, I think that YA books in general just have a really great pacing and a really great fast-paced book structure. So I find that especially when I am in a little bit of a reading slump, I am currently filming a couple different vlogs at the same time. I'm not really loving some of my other books that I've been reading for those vlogs, but I have found that picking up a fast-paced YA is such a great way to keep myself from a reading slump or get myself excited about reading again, just because the pacing's really great, the chapters are very manageable, and at no point does this book feel slow. So halfway through, I'm really intrigued. I feel like the second half of this one is going to go by just as fast-paced as the first. In this book, we are following three young women. The first of our main characters is named Zara. She is desperately searching for magic, in particular necromancy, because her sister was murdered a year ago, and she wants to stop at nothing to bring her sister back from the dead. We are also following Jude. She is the daughter of a very wealthy and successful businessman, and she is searching out a magical cure. She really dabbled in some magic that she was not prepared for, and she ended up tethering her soul to a demon, and with this bout of magic going horribly wrong, she is living a very cursed existence, and she is searching for someone who can fix this curse that she has put upon herself. We are also following Emer, who is a curse writer. She is a witch. She grew up in a coven of women who taught witchcraft and helped protect other women in the community. She can create invocations. Now these are contracts with a demon, so she gives them to women who really need her assistance, who are okay with paying the price of doing a deal with a demon to obtain power to get themselves out of horrible situations. Now these three all come into contact with each other when they realize that a lot of magical young women have gone missing or have turned up murdered at the hand of someone who is specifically targeting witches. So they all have their own reasonings for wanting to join in and try and figure out who this killer is, and it turns out the killer may also be magical himself. So this is a paranormal murder mystery. Now in witch books, usually you'll have witches as the protagonist, witchcraft as good, or witchcraft as the antagonist, and witches as evil. This one, it's a little bit of a mix of both, because the witches, the witchcraft, even though you make deals with demons, the young women who dabble in magic and in witchcraft are doing so to save themselves from abusive situations or just really down on their luck situations. So overall, I am having a really good time. Like the Year of the Witching, this does have to deal with younger protagonists, young women who are using witchcraft as a means of battling oppression in society and using magic and their powers to reclaim power for themselves, not just in the demonic possession way, but just internal power. So I'm having a lot of fun. I definitely could see myself finishing this today just because it is so fast-paced and so readable. So I am going to go finish this one up, and I will come back on later and let y'all know my thoughts. Okay, so I did finish the Invocations, and overall I had a good time with it. I definitely think that if you liked Year of the Witching and you're looking for another YA horror that's like it, or you know, if you've read this and you're looking for something else, the Year of the Witching would be a great comp title as well. This definitely has some atmospheric witchy vibes. This takes place at the end of October, beginning of November. This also very much feels, if you like dark academia and like that kind of aesthetic and ambiance in your books, I think this could be a really good pick for you as well. This is definitely horror with witches. This gets very graphic at times in terms of body horror. The magic system is really dark. It has to deal with necromancy and demons, and I really thought the magic system was really cool and unique. I really loved that aspect of it, and it really went there. Definitely very bloody, very gory. This does have to deal with necromancy, so if you get squeamish about body horror in terms of maybe like the rotting process of a corpse, or just in general, there's a lot of body horror. There's a lot of blood, there's a lot of pus, there's a lot to deal with body horror, so if you were squeamish, maybe stick away from this one, because I was surprised at how brutal and gory this one got. I definitely liked it better than House of Hollow, so I'm excited to see that this author, at least for me, I'm enjoying her books more and more as she publishes, so she's definitely an author that I am going to keep my eye on. That being said, sometimes the characters felt like they should have been older than they are. Not all the time. Usually they feel very much true to, I believe they're all 16 or 17. Most of the time that felt like the case. However, there were just some moments where I felt like they felt older, but YA, we are following younger protagonists. And then the ending, I just felt the ending was a little predictable and a little bit cliche, but not in a bad way. This was one where, even though I did predict like a lot of the twists and what was going to happen in the ending, I had a fun time overall reading this one. So if you are looking for a gory witch book that is very fast paced, I would recommend this one. I had a good time reading it. So first book down, it went great. Now we are going to pick up Hex by Thomas Olde Heuvelt. Mother Horror says, prepare yourself if you read this book at night in your bed. You will turn off the light and imagine a dark shape standing nearby. It's still watching you all night long. Black Springs is an isolated community bound together by a curse. The Black Rock Witch has sealed the fate of every resident of Black Springs. They must accept a life confined to Black Springs and haunted by death. With its stitched-closed mouth and eyes, the witch comes and goes. The townspeople fear waking the witch. Its eyes must always stay closed or else. Mother Horror says Hex checks so many boxes for me. It's horror with heart, scary, funny, weird, and memorable. It's about magic and supernatural phenomena as much as it is about human nature. So this sounds super intriguing. I cannot wait to dive in. Hey vlog, so I am now 50% of the way through Hex, and I'm really kicking myself for not having read this sooner. This is one where it has been on my TBR for such a long time, and I have just never gotten around to it, and I'm really glad that this vlog is giving me the chance to pick this book up and read this off of my backlist. This edition came out in 2012, so it's kind of fun to me to read a lot of the main characters that we're following are teenagers, and I was a teenager in 2012. I was a high school student in 2012. So I'm enjoying going back in time and reading that. I know this is so hit or miss for people, but there are a number of references in here, just kind of like throwaway references to different pop culture things. Like at one point, the Gangnam Style dance is mentioned, and I love that. I love that in a book. I know a lot of people, totally valid if you're one of those people, a lot of people hate that, but I like reading pop culture references because to me it does date a book, but then when I'm reading this book, it came out in 2012, it feels very, very like 2012, and it really helps immerse me into the time period and just the story in general. So that's been pretty fun. But this is about a town called Black Springs. They are haunted, they're cursed by a witch from the 16th century. This town has a curse upon it, and no one can leave the town, and they have to try and keep this witch a secret. Now you can imagine that it was easier to stay isolated from the outside outside world in the 1600s, 1700s, 1800s than it is to stay isolated in 2012 with the internet and just the world becoming more connected, and it's easier to share information. So this town has implemented a lot of strategies and curfews and is very insular. People cannot leave and they do not want new people coming in. So it's very interesting to see like the town council and the things that they do to keep this curse contained. And we're following, you know, several different townspeople. Some of the townspeople like the status quo. They don't want to change it. They don't want to risk the curse getting worse. And some of the teenagers are really chafing against this lifestyle because they can see, because again, through the internet and things like social media, everything that they're missing out on. So a lot of the teenagers in this town want to shake up the status quo, see if they can kind of get this town free of the curse. And this is so interesting. This is the first book that I've read that really captures like the essence of a small town that's filled with witch hysteria, because I feel like one of my very favorite witchy horror books is Slewfoot by Brom, and we are following a woman who is accused of witchcraft, but that takes place in 1666. I feel like if you're reading a plot like that, it normally takes place back then, and you see the mob mentality and the crowd mentality and people in this small town really doing horrific things, and usually you don't see that in a modern setting, but this one you kind of start to see how mob mentality, as things start to get worse for the townspeople, how this mob mentality, this witch hunt mentality still very much can exist. So that has been very intriguing for me. When I got to the 50% mark, I did not want to stop. I wanted to keep reading, but I wanted to come on and film this update for y'all because 50% of the way in, I feel like I found a new author to pick up. I don't know what else. I know this author came out with a new book actually this year, and I think it's in like the same universe as this book. I don't think it's a direct sequel, but I think it's like the same universe. So I am really intrigued to see where this one is going to go. So I'm hoping that the last 50% was as great as the first 50%. I'm gonna finish this one up and I will check back in and let y'all know my final thoughts. Okay friends, so I finished Hex and I had a really good time with this one. This is definitely a witch book that is very creepy, very eerie. The descriptions of the witch and the things that take place within this small town, very creepy. My biggest complaint with this one is that descriptions of female characters tend to get a little bit weird, a little bit creepy and misogynistic. In particular, there are two women characters, they're different women, and they are both described in the same weird way of having like foreheads too big for their faces or something like that. Like it's the same exact wording, so that makes me feel maybe there's like a phrase that's lost in translation because this is a translated book. But overall, the ways in which women and female characters in here were described was just a little bit gross. It kind of reminds me a little bit of earlier Stephen King with just like descriptions of especially like female intimate private parts that are just like, why are we describing them here? So that was a little off-putting. However, I did really enjoy the rest of this for the most part. The ending of this book is very explosive, and when you get to the acknowledgements, you realize the author does talk about how this was originally published in Dutch in 2013, and then the author actually helped write it in English to publish again in the US, and in the process of doing so, he changed the ending. So the Dutch version has a different ending than this US version. I did look it up because I was really curious, because there was a little bit of, I think this is nitpicky on my part, honestly, there were some things about the ending that I didn't love, so I was wondering if the original ending like hit a little bit better or I would enjoy it more. There's not too much of a substantial difference from what I could find between the Dutch and the English version. I think the English version has the better ending, but if I am being honest, both of them feel just a little bit unsatisfying with everything that we go throughout this book. But overall, I really enjoyed enjoyed this one. Very creepy. When I'm looking for witch horror, this is what I'm looking for. I really thought this really captured like the small town hysteria that we normally see in historical fiction about witches, and then brings it to the modern day, or you know, the modern day when this came out. This book is about 10 years old, but you know, witch hunting in like the modern day as opposed to the 1600s. So I enjoyed that aspect. The witch is very creepy. The way that the town operates, very creepy. This is great small town isolated setting horror, and when I am looking for witch horror, if the witches are not the protagonists and they're the antagonists, I need a really creepy sinister witch, and this book absolutely delivered. I will definitely be checking out more by this author. So now we are 2 books down in this vlog. We are now moving on to The Necromancer's House by Christopher Buehlman. Our main character, Andrew Blankenship, is a recovering alcoholic and a practicing warlock. He is able to speak with the dead through film. His house is a maze of sorcerous booby traps and escape tunnels. Andrew has long known that magic is a brutal game requiring blood sacrifice and a willingness to confront death, but many years of peace and comfort have left him soft, more concerned with maintaining false youth than with seeing to his own defense. Now a monster straight from the pages of Russian folklore is coming for him, and frost and death are coming with her. I'm really excited about this one. I have read from Christopher Buehlman before and really enjoyed one. I didn't love the other, but I did love The Lesser Dead, so I'm really hoping that this is another similar experience. I've really enjoyed the 2 books that I've read for this vlog so far, so let's dive into this one. Hopefully it's a winner as well. Okay friends, so I am now 50% of the way through The Necromancer's House by Christopher Buehlman, and this one is turning out to be a little bit of a mixed bag. Definitely not loving it as much as the other 2 books in this vlog, but I will say I started this one as a ebook and it was a little bit hard to follow, but luckily I did find that Hoopla had the audiobook. Hoopla is not my favorite, especially for audiobooks, because there's not really any toggling when it comes to like chapter selection or finding your place. It's just one long continuous audio file, but I did find the audiobook on Hoopla, and this is working a whole lot better for me on audiobook. I've noticed quite a few of Christopher Buehlman's books. They have a very chatty, very conversational, very stream of consciousness writing style, and for me that works a lot better as an audiobook. The audiobook narrator does a really good job differentiating between the characters and really helped with the very stream of consciousness that this book took. So if you have an option to listen to the audiobook or read it physically, I would recommend the audiobook. I think you're going to have a lot better of a time, because honestly the ebook just was not working for me. I also want to point out potentially that if you picked up the physical book, maybe there's some like formatting there that maybe would make it work a little bit better than the ebook, but regardless it is going a little bit better now that I've switched to the audiobook. However, this book, I'm gonna be honest, could also have been a DNF at this point if it were not for the fact that number 1, this book I'm reading it for a vlog, and number 2, because I have loved things from Christopher Buehlman in the past. Now he's an author, I kind of equate him in like a very strange way to Silvia Moreno Garcia, because both of them, like their books are so wildly different from book to book. So I've noticed for both of them, just because you've liked one one doesn't mean that you'll like the others. And I think that's like a really cool thing that they do, that they're able to reinvent themselves and take like a different subgenre in their space and write a book that just feels so different. This definitely feels different than The Lesser Dead and The Suicide Motor Club, which are the two books that I've read from Christopher Buehlman before. The Lesser Dead, I've talked about it before. I love it. It's one of my favorite vampire books. It's also one that I read via audiobook that really worked well. So because I loved that so much, and I didn't love The Suicide Motor Club, but these three books that I've read by him have all felt so very different. So, you know, this is an author where it's just like, I never know. I never know what I'm getting into when I pick up his books. Whether that's good, whether that's bad, it's always a new experience every single time I pick up a Buehlman book. So this one just, it's okay. First of all, the magic system, super cool. The way that magic is integrated and the way that different people can learn magic and have it really interact with like modern technology and things like that, very, very cool. The narration style, not a big fan of. It definitely gets easier as you get into the book and you just become accustomed to realizing that within a chapter you could maybe switch point of views, even like in the middle of a sentence sometimes, and just there are a couple mixed media elements that aren't working the best for me because there's not really any indication that we're moving from like a physical conversation to an email conversation. So that's like, it's a little bit hard to get into this book. When you get into it, you don't notice it as much, but this is one where it's very hard to kind of grasp what's going on and how the story is being told to you, as well as there is a main character. Well, our main character is Andrew and his best friend is named Annika. She is a lesbian, and it's like probably like the worst like queer rep that I've read all year, and I don't know if that's like supposed to be like intentional or not. Like 50% of the way through the story, it's just the way that this character is written about, the way that our main character like feels about her, and the way that they have a relationship. Like they are friends, but they've like hooked up multiple times, even though she's a lesbian, but she doesn't like the word lesbian because it's a bad word, which is like super like problematic. Lesbian's not a bad word, but just the lesbian rep is wild. Also, in addition to that, Annika is a sex offender. I know some people like they have hard and fast rules of different protagonists that they will not follow, and so Annika is a sex offender. She was a teacher and slept with a student, and just that, including the fact that she's the only gay character in this book, is just like wildly problematic, especially because it was a college class that she was teaching. So we could have had the child not be 17 and still have that same like power dynamic struggle conflict to go through. But so just, you know, a warning that you are following a character. They meet up, they're both in AA, and that is Annika's struggle, is that she is a child sex offender. It's an odd choice that doesn't seem relevant at the moment. It just seems like a weird, quirky piece of trivia like about this character's backstory, so I'm not really sure why it's in there. Maybe we'll get more in the second 50% of this book, but like that's just very strange and troubling and very triggering. So I'm like really keeping an eye on that. I really hate that, but I think I'm gonna push through and just see how the rest of this book kind of comes together, because magic system's cool. And in terms of witches and like witch rep, the antagonist in this is going to be Baba Yaga, and I have been looking for like a specifically Baba Yaga centric witch horror story for a while. So just keep in mind the queer rep and just the whole entire main character of Annika. I don't love her at all, and I don't know what's going on there, but I'm kind of intrigued in the rest of the story. We're just gonna finish it up, and yeah, I'll let you know my thoughts. I should be able to finish it either tonight or tomorrow morning and come on here and let y'all know how the Necromancer's house worked for me. Hey vlog, so I finished The Necromancer's House by Christopher Buehlman. Unfortunately, I did not love this one. The last 50% did not do anything that made me enjoy it more than the first 50%. I don't know if I could have gotten through this one without the audiobook. I was just not a fan of the way the story kind of moved. It was very, very strange. It felt a little bit bloated. It felt like all of the story we were building up to something, and I just didn't particularly like how the ending, like the big boss battle happened. I wanted more out of the magic system because there wasn't really a magic system. Magic was there. It wasn't clearly defined or explained. There were these cool magical abilities that I wanted to see more of, but just the story did not feel cohesive to me. Now, I did like how it ended. I thought the story ended well, but I didn't like the road to get there. Things that I liked about this one, there was some Dayton, Ohio rep, some Yellow Springs, Ohio rep, which I thought was really cool. I'm from that area, so you know, it was fun to see that mentioned. And I also, again, the magic system was really cool. I like a book that uses Baba Yaga. Now moving on to the negatives, I don't think that Baba Yaga was utilized enough. There was this whole entire thing that took place before this story happened with our main character and Baba Yaga. It sounds like he faced off with Baba Yaga. We never get to see that on the page. We just know that they've had a history before, and then she's coming back to collect on debts or to right some wrongs. So I would have liked to see, I almost think the better story could have been Andrew's time in Russia when he first met Baba Yaga, because that seemed interesting. We knew there was a past between the characters. We never really got a lot of explanation or really what happened there. I just wanted more Baba Yaga. This is a Baba Yaga story, but I never got the sense that the Baba Yaga we were reading about was the Baba Yaga. Like, if you're thinking of folklore and witches, she's the witch, and I wanted to see more of her. I wanted to see more of her house, and just ultimately this didn't work for me. I also didn't love the character of Annika. I talked about her at length in the last update. She did not get better for me. I really do think this story would have been so much stronger without her past, and also without our main character's lust for her the whole entire time. Men and women can just be friends, especially when the woman is not interested in men at all. And I really didn't like how he was constantly obsessed with her, and our main character Andrew was constantly trying to make like a relationship happen between him and his best friend, who is a lesbian. She's not interested in you. So I didn't love that. Thought it would be a stronger story without that. There's actually another secondary character that I thought could have been swapped out and just used him instead of Annika, and I thought maybe that would be like a better solution. I don't know. I didn't love that character dynamic or that character, and yeah, I'm a little bit nervous because just a little bit of a sneak peek for future vlogs to come in this series. I do have a Christopher Buehlman book in the Cryptid TBR. Those Across the River. It's about werewolves, so I'm a little nervous because now I've read 3 Christopher Buehlmans. I've loved one, didn't really love the others, so I don't know. I don't know what to expect for that one, but unfortunately, The Necromancer's House, kind of a miss. Now, we do have some good news because I managed to track down a copy of The Nightmare Girl by Jonathan Janz. It was recently added to my library's Hoopla account, so we get to read it for this vlog, and I'm excited about it. Mother Horror says that The Nightmare Girl is the story of an average Joe, his name is actually Joe, who makes an off-the-cuff decision to involve himself in a situation that could potentially change his life forever. Joe Crawford is a stand-up guy, a family man who deeply loves his wife and daughter. He holds a hard line between right and wrong, even when he's tempted to be drawn in by the allure of something forbidden or to take the easy way out in a difficult situation. Janz does a fantastic job of setting up the story for his readers. His pacing for character building is perfect, and readers can really invest in the characters' lives as conflict and tension begin to rise to a boiling point. The antagonists practicing evil witchcraft and the dark occult themes of this otherwise picturesque story are a stark contrast to the health and vibrancy of the protagonists. It feels realistic. The infiltration of bad people into a well-meaning family. This scenario could easily happen. So let's dive into the 4th and final book of this vlog, The Nightmare Girl. Okay vlog, so I am now 50% of the way through The Nightmare Girl by Jonathan Janz. This one is very fast paced. The action starts almost immediately. We're following our main character Joe. He's a contractor. He's a very average Joe. He loves his wife. He loves his child. They are fueling up at a gas station when at the pump next to them, Joe witnesses a woman beating her child. This beating and abuse is so horrific that Joe steps in and gets involved and separates the mother from her child, and the police get involved. Joe thinks that this is a crazy experience, but it's just a one-off experience. He can move on with his life and hope for the best for that family. However, his actions lead to that child being taken from the home, and the mother of the child and her mother are hell-bent on revenge because they see him as the catalyst for their child being taken away, and the story really takes off from there. This is going okay so far. This is very fast-paced. It's very readable. I wish that I could read it physically. I'm not loving the audiobook production for this one, but that's okay. Beggars can't be choosers. I'm just really glad that I got a hand on a copy of this to read it for this vlog. So I feel like this is like the exact opposite of purple prose to me. I feel like if you're a person who, you know, Stephen King, I love Stephen King. I love his tangents. I love how wordy he gets. This is like the complete opposite of that. The prose is very straightforward and to the point, so I definitely can see, like, I've heard Jonathan Janz's name thrown around a lot in terms of horror. I can see why he's popular because even though I'm not loving this one, it's intensely readable. The pace is breakneck and the writing is very digestible, so if you're someone who does not like flowery writing at all, I would maybe check out this book. This is not a recommendation just yet because at 50% of the way through, I'm not loving it. I don't have a lot to say about it, so this update is going to be a little bit short. There's nothing like inherently wrong about it or that I'm hating about it, but there's nothing that I'm loving about it either. But it is very fast-paced and it is on the shorter end as well, so I do anticipate I might be able to finish it up today or perhaps tomorrow. So the big takeaway from this update is that it is very readable. So I am going to go finish up that book. I will let y'all know my final thoughts and we will wrap up this witchy reading vlog together. So I'm gonna go get to reading and I will talk to y'all later. Okay, so it is actually the same day as the last update, but I did finish The Nightmare Girl by Jonathan Janz and it was okay. It's definitely not a book for me. I don't think there wasn't anything too like glaringly wrong with it or things that I hated about it. Just it wasn't my type of book. The biggest thing that I didn't love about this one is that every single character, like our main character especially, he's almost in his 40s. He's late 30s, early 40s, and his mental monologue, but also just the way he talks, he sounds like a 12-year-old boy. And not just him, but every other person I feel like in this whole entire book, like their inner monologues and the way that they spoke to each other and the senses of humor all felt very, very childish, but childish in the way where, like, picture a group of 12-year-old, 13-year-old boys together, like making jokes about their genitals. Like that was a sense of humor in this, which I don't find funny. I think that's super juvenile and kind of gross, and like this book just felt very male gazy in like a very weird way, even when it didn't like matter to the plot, because sometimes, okay, we can give it, sometimes maybe it's relevant, maybe describing a character, or for like the antagonists, it's a very lewd set of antagonists, so I can see a little bit of unsavory language and weird jokes there, but just the whole entire book just felt like very much just in terms of the humor catered towards a teen boy. I'm not a teen boy. I didn't love that. So that's my biggest complaint with the book. But in general, for horror, I tend to like slower burn stories. I tend to like character driven and just generally slower books. So this is a breakneck paced book and it's very fast. And I'd say it's plot over character driven, and the protagonists and the antagonists both felt like very one-dimensional to me in this type of story. I don't think they need to be like very, very detailed detailed. It's not like a character study or anything like that. It's a fast-paced horror. So if you like fast-paced horror and if you don't mind like that lewdness, maybe you would appreciate this one. I don't know. Let me know down below if you've ever read a Jonathan Janz, because at this point in time, I feel like just based on this book, he's not an author for me. Like the way that he writes and the way that I like to read just aren't compatible with each other. But if this is like a vastly different book than the rest of his catalog, and if you feel like other books of his are better, let me know down below, because, you know, I'm game to give him another shot. Potentially some of the things that I had an issue with, maybe that is just because of the types of characters that we're dealing with. I don't know, but that is the end of this witchy reading vlog. I had a lot of fun, and honestly, I kind of want to do like a follow-up, not necessarily a follow-up to this video because I have now read all of the witchy recommendations in this book, but just a witchy horror vlog in general, because Slewfoot, it's one of my favorite horrors. I think it's honestly in my top 10 horrors of all time. When I love a witch book, I really love a witch book, so I would love to find, like, I didn't find a 5-star in this video. I did find some books I liked more than others, but I think maybe at the end of October, beginning of November, maybe we'll do a witchy vlog and try and find some more witchy horror. So thank you all so much for watching. Just in terms of the books that I read in this vlog, I think my least favorite's gonna have to be The Nightmare Girl. Overall, I had less issues than I did the Buehlman book, but just like the writing style and everything like that, it just didn't really work for me. And then of course we have The Necromancer's House by Christopher Buehlman. Technically this one I had more issues with than the Jonathan Janz, but I've read other things by Buehlman before and I liked the writing style better. I thought the writing style was better, so that's why that one is a little bit higher up on this ranking system. And then I liked the Invocations next. I think this is a really strong, solid YA book that would appeal to YA readers but also adult readers as well. And then my favorite book that I read in this vlog is Hex by Thomas Olde Heuvelt. So I had a really good week of reading. Thank you all so much for watching. This is probably my favorite vlog series that I have ever done, and I'm really excited for the next installation. Keep an eye out for that. It's either gonna be cryptids or cults. I don't know. We'll have to see what books are available to me based on my library and who has holds on it and everything, but it's gonna be either cryptids or cults, so keep an eye out for that video. Thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up, leave a comment down below, subscribe to my channel for all of the bookish, cozy gaming, and horror content. Stay safe, stay spooky, and I will see y'all in the next video. Bye!